You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know Maya.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at YOUR.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. But wait, this is a live episode, like live, remote live, coming to you live from Cabos San Lucas Mexico. Though I'm on vacation, I said the show must go on because, as I say, I'm dedicated to making the conversation about mental wellness normalized in an everyday conversation so we can dig deep and do all that work so we can have the best versions of ourselves we seek out. So, of course, I say my podcast looks to embrace salient topics specifically that are related to mental wellness. I like to believe that I'm fresh and forward thinking in my perspective, but the focus of the podcast is to pull back that veil of self-doubt and self-sabotage that plagues so many of us in our lives to help to identify the ambitions and harness the motivation to help you yield and myself yield the satisfaction that we totally seek in our daily lives. So if you are a first-time listener or viewer, well, welcome aboard. I might seem a little fancy since I'm on a live remote, which, by the way, this is great mentally. My space has been fantastic. That's why I absolutely had to do an episode. So as I always say, welcome, buckle up for safety, because occasionally it can be an unexpected bumpy ride. Not that I'll say something that, is going to absolutely unhinge you, but it might get you to thinking and wondering and questioning some things. And that's what the show is about, as you're working to get to the best version of yourself. Of course, if you happen to be a returning viewer or listener, then you know how we do things here. You're familiar. Grab a pencil and paper because you might need to jot down something that you want to go back and reflect on a bit later, and that's okay. The rule of this show, rule number one, in this podcast, is you work at your pace as you're discovering how to process things that you're learning through each episode. So this is episode 51. But if you're still back in episode 35, because that's where episode and that particular topic that you needed to do some work, well, so be it. Though I always appreciate when you're front and center for every episode when it airs on Thursdays. I'm working on times. It might be 30 p.m. Central Standard Time, but I had to move it up since I'm out of the country. So today is a little bit early. But either way, it's important to work on these episodes in your time frame. So for the next 60 minutes, it's all about you along with me. So find that space that's comfortable and quiet. Grab your pencil and paper, your beverage of choice. I'm really hydrating because it's hot where I am. And let's focus on working on that best version of you that we seek in our lives on a daily basis. So this is episode 51. So 50 was about going into the Maya mailbag, but this one is about something I thought was important because it's popped up in a couple different episodes. And we talk about working on things you can put into your Maya toolbox. Those things are going to help you to get to that best version of yourself. So episode 51, Truth Begins With You. The role of honesty with self is what this episode's about. I thought, I shouldn't just take it for granted that you know exactly what it means to be truthful and honest with yourself. Because if you're not doing that with yourself, it's going to be real hard to do it with someone else. You're welcome to join the conversation as always. You can just go to the comment section, whether it be on Facebook or YouTube. You can type a comment in, and just like Robert, who's always front and center, who, by the way, is going, no, I'm not in Hawaii. Because if I was in Hawaii, where he happens to be in, I definitely would have said, hey, I'm in your neck of the woods. And I would have said, hey, let's meet up if we can. So no, I am not in Hawaii. I am actually in Mexico. It may look a little familiar, but I'm not in your space. But just like Robert, if you want to join the conversation, all you have to do is go into the comment section, type something, and I can share it, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, or if you're watching via YOUR.com. Either way, I can incorporate your comments into the show, which is very important. Remember, you can always listen to episodes of Maya at YOUR.com. Remember, with every podcast, there is going to be a podcast companion. So additional supplemental information, I think, that can help to really give more depth to the conversation. So you just go to YOUR.com, click on the podcast resource link, and then right under episode 51 will be a couple things that I thought were worthy of being shared. Hopefully by now you are subscribing to my YouTube channel. Just go search Maya Akai. And of course, a lot of Japanese anime is going to pop up first. You scroll down, boom, you'll see my face. Like, subscribe, and share. But as always, you can find episodes of Maya on your favorite podcast platform. I am not going to discriminate and say I only want you to go to MayaAkai.com. Of course I do. But you can find episodes of the show on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify. There's so many podcast platforms I'm on. Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. And last but not least, hopefully you have gotten social with me by now. You are following me on Twitter, Instagram at Maya_Akai, and Facebook, Maya Kai Presents. Those are all the ways that you can be interactive and connected to the show. Now, we're consistent in what we do here, which means we're going to open up our toolbox. We're going to pull out that tool, which is our emotional intelligence that we use every single show. It is the most important tool in your toolbox. You should wake up and instantly take it out of your toolbox and put it on your table. When you go to bed at night, you're welcome to put it away so it can have a break. Though subconsciously, you're still probably processing some things. But as you know, your emotional intelligence is one of the most important things that you use. We refer to it as your EI. And that's your ability to perceive, evaluate, and control your emotions, but also to get insight into others, which is a big part of the process. You can't just be in tune with yourself and not in tune with others and think you're going to really get to the best version of you and have those healthy relationships that you actually seek out. So just remember, EI, front and center all the time, along with objectivity and honesty. I was going to say these are the three things that should always be on your table. As I said to you before, there was going to be an overarching theme that was going to kind of permeate throughout every single episode for 2021, because working on the best daily version of you, which means when you're good daily, it's a long-term process that gives long-term results. So short-term effort turns into long-term results. And what did I say? I was absolutely, this saying to me embodies everything in 2021, what all the Maya episodes are about, which is simple as this. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Aristotle. You're talking about a Greek philosopher that goes hundreds of years back that knew at the essence of understanding you, it makes everything else about your life make so much more sense. So that is the overarching theme for the entire 2021 year for Maya. It's important to know that when you begin to understand you, everything else will fall into place. With that being said, last week, episode 50, as I reached into the Maya virtual mailbag and said, hey, if you're in an episode and something really kind of makes you think and you want to get more insight into it, not just episode 51 with truth begins with you, the role of honesty with self, but the Maya mailbag is extremely important because it allows for you to send me a virtual letter, because an episode may have got you thinking, reflecting on how to navigate a difficult situation, or if you're feeling stuck with working on getting to that best version of yourself. Send me a virtual letter, aka an email, with your thoughts or questions to getinspired@mayaakai.com. And just like last week, it may be 4 letters or 3 letters I might feature in a show, a full show. It might be 1 letter that really is worthy of an episode all on its own. But whatever the case may be, you send me a virtual letter to Maya's mailbag, and I'll definitely read it, respond, because I may have to ask you a couple of questions in regards to kind of what you're asking me to get a better idea of the situation you're presenting to me. But just go ahead and send your emails to getinspired@mayaakai.com, and I'll be able to address your virtual letter. Now, here's the thing you must always remember, even when you're dropping me a virtual letter. Nothing I'm giving you is you should do this. It's not advice, it's insight. It's about a journey. I always tell people, if you've got a lot of heavy work to do or some things you're struggling with, this is where I'm going to tell you, you should go see your own therapist, sit down and do the work so somebody can really connect with you and get a better understanding. So nothing I say here at Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition is direction, advice. It's purely insight into mental wellness that I'm sharing with you that might put you on that journey to deciding you do need to see someone, or better yet, just giving you some simple nuggets that can help you to continue daily work towards that best version of yourself. So like I say, I'm your friendly neighborhood, mental advocate. That's what I am. But here is not advice or anything of that nature. It's strictly just insight. And I always need you to keep that in mind. So go ahead and drop me a virtual letter in the Maya mailbag. Just email me at getinspired@mayaakai.com. Now, episode 51, let's just go ahead and jump into it. After last week, I really felt like, something, after some of the virtual letters that came in, you just can't sit here and assume with people that there's a clear understanding about what truth and honesty looks like, because people like to bend things to their will because it accommodates them. If you're still in that vein, I'm going to tell you something. You're not working to the best version of yourself. So I felt, before I keep assuming that everybody really has a clear understanding about truth begins with you and the role of honesty with self, and self-discovery and self-awareness and self-advocacy, I thought, well, you know something? We need to have a conversation about it. So then there are no gray areas. You have a clear understanding of what it means to truly be honest with yourself. Because if you're not honest with yourself, you're not going to be honest with others. So that's the whole point of this particular episode. is we're going to focus on those key domains when we talk about the emotional, mental, physical, professional, social, spiritual realms that are integral parts of you navigating your daily life. And in this episode, we're going to focus on how honesty and truth with yourself is really a key part of being able to really navigate those domains. So like I said, I'm coming to live from you from Cabos San Lucas, Mexico, on vacation, but still dedicated to making mental wellness something that's important front and center. So it'll be conversation that I think you'll enjoy, and it might be even a little illuminating, some sunlight behind me, different scenery. Hopefully it'll be mentally as stimulating for you as it has been for me. Okay, so something I always do whenever I start any of my shows. I think it's important to put everything within a respective framework. I can't make the assumption that, you just understand exactly what truth means, exactly what honesty means. So for me, I feel that it's extremely important to go ahead and say, let's put into a framework, which, for me is that literal part of, we're going to flesh it out with the definition. So if you were to go look up, we're going to actually start with the opposite of truth, but what is a lie? Okay. Now, mind you, you should actually have a great idea of what a lie is. Everyone has told one. One has probably been told to you. So it's not like you don't know what it is. But let's be really concrete about this. A lie is an assertion that is believed to be false, typically used with the purpose of deceiving someone, versus the truth. The truth is that which is true in accordance with fact or reality. So again, a lie, let's be clear about this, is an assertion that is believed to be false, typically used with the purpose of deceiving someone, which means it's not acting on fact. And it's purely done for deception. Whether your deception for telling a lie is you wanted to spare someone's feelings, you wanted to minimize the outcome or consequences for an action, it still was about deception of someone or something, manipulation, versus the truth is flat out what it is. It is true in accordance with fact or reality. Now I'm going to tell you something. This is where a lot of people tend to go off the rails. Because when we talk about dealing in fact and reality, this is where we usually run into issues with people, because people tend to get in their feelings and their emotions, and they can't often decipher things. So this is where that wonderful idea of honesty comes in. Honesty and truth literally go hand in hand. Because if you talk about honesty is the adherence to facts and fairness and straightforwardness of conduct. So it's like taking truth, which is in accordance with facts and reality, and honesty becomes the action behind what truth really is. Now, to me, this isn't about semantics. I feel like this is pretty straightforward, but people frequently attempt to bend the truth because they don't want to deal and be honest. Because I always say this all the time. If telling the truth was honest, people wouldn't bother to lie. Let's be honest. Legitimately, let's be honest, no pun intended. If it was always easy to do the right thing and to stand firm and be in accordance with straightforwardness and fairness, then we would not think twice about doing it. But whenever we know there could be a consequence that comes from our actions or something, or it's often easy to say, well, I don't want to be honest because I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. Ask yourself this question. Anytime that you have chose to not be honest with someone in the long haul, has it not have greater consequences or greater negative outcome than if you just would have been honest from the very beginning of it? Food for thought on this. And there shouldn't have to be a whole bunch of food for thought about honesty, but hey, this is what this episode's all about. Honesty, like I just said, is putting truth into action. Here's what I want you to think about, though, because we've all been guilty of not being honest. Choosing to blur the lines usually comes from when a person lacks insight and or they have no idea of what objective means. Most people operate from a position of subjectivity. I can only see it from my perspective, and everybody else, or here's what's better, the truth or reality purely is bent because I just really have poor perspective. By the way, there's a whole other episode way back there that talks about perception and perspective and how you got to get some when you're working on that best version of you. So if you think about it, if you lack the ability to be objective, then others' perspectives and let's be honest, and often the truth is going to be difficult for you because you're always going to believe that it's arbitrary because you're only thinking about it literally from a subjective standpoint. This is when it's important when you're working on that best version of you to do what I call a fact evaluation. So when you're doing a fact evaluation, when you're looking at a situation for what it is or when you're dealing with a person. It'll help you to not truly lose your way with being honest with yourself and therefore other people. You have to step back and look at the facts as they exist, and you can't look at it from an emotional standpoint. This is where your EI and objectivity literally go hand in hand. It's difficult to step back from a situation and to say, okay, you know something, I really don't particularly care for this, but if I'm going to keep it real, this is what happened. Is it possible that maybe that person didn't mean to hurt my feelings? Because the situation honestly required that action. I just didn't particularly care for it because I felt like I was on the short end of the stick. But if I'm going to be truthful and honest, their action was required, but the outcome, intentions and outcomes, by the way, are always different and not always synonymous as we think they should be, made me feel a certain way. If you hear yourself saying in any situation, that makes me feel a certain kind of way, that's when I need you to do a fact evaluation. Why do you feel that way? And the way you feel doesn't by any means mean that what happened is not real and not factual. Just because it made you get in your feelings about it doesn't mean that it's not true. And that's a big thing about being able to do fact evaluation. So since we're sitting here just being honest, let's go ahead and just do our first real talk time of the show. Okay? This is where I would say we can take objectivity in our toolbox and really kind of maybe pull it out a bit, stretch it, so it gets more value for us. It gives us more depth and more breadth when we talk about having perspective. What is your objectivity IQ like? Now, mind you, this is kind of a YOUR.M.A.YA-ism. I just created a YOUR.M.A.YA-ism without thinking about it. The objectivity IQ is something when I was working on the show, I just came up with and didn't think about, oh, wait a minute, this is a YOUR.M.A.YA-ism. But all of a sudden, I'm having great clarity and insight. And, just the warm weather is really having this fantastic, kind of effect on me. Welcome to the show, Michael Carson. Thank you. Fact evaluation. Like I said, as I work on the show, I grow as I do these shows with you guys. It makes me reflect, think, dig. So like I said, this isn't about me telling you what to do. This isn't advice. This is me sharing insight about how to progress through your mental wellness journey. So just because I feel or say this is something to think about, reflect on it. But it doesn't mean that maybe you're ready to make those kind of steps forward. And I'm like, and if you got real heavy lifting and work to do, that's when you really should get yourself a counselor or a therapist so you can connect with somebody and get the real work you need to do. This is just to help you say, perhaps I do need to think about doing that because there's some things that I really kind of need to work on that I'm not doing so well in doing it for myself. So just know that. So real talk time. So when we talked about fact evaluation, part of what's going to make you successful at that is kind of understanding where your objectivity IQ, where does it fall in your ability to legitimately be objective in situations? So here's what I would ask you if you're going to gauge or get a feel for your objectivity IQ, which to be able, honestly, I didn't put a scale on this, but because it's something new I just created in the YOUR.M.A.YA-ism, I think it's worthy of something that maybe I'll do an episode on and really flesh this out because I think a fact evaluation and an objectivity IQ are going to be big tools that you're going to use frequently. But let me ask you this, when we talk about your ability to have objectivity, when something happens that you don't expect, or if you feel slighted or wrong, can you listen objectively with what the another person is expressing? And can you look at the facts as they are? Or do you instantly feel like it's wrong? Or does your emotions guide how you act? You have some people who literally have poor emotional regulation and refuse to acknowledge it because instantly their emotions take over. And opposed to stepping back and listening, they just let their emotions ride over it. And you can tell by the way they respond to you. So part of that whole navigating that emotion is, let's be honest. Yes, our emotions step into how we make decisions or how we choose to react. Because remember, the other big thing in your YOUR.M.A.YA toolbox is stop reacting and start responding. Because responding means you stop, look, listen, pay attention, and evaluate. That's that EI piece too. But we also have to be aware of sometimes the reason that we can't be objective is because we are driven by emotion. We are driven by past experiences, or our anger blinds us from the truth because we're in our feelings. And often if you're in your feelings, hurt or anger tends to be the things that cloud your vision. So when you ask yourself about your objectivity IQ, is it absolutely connected to you in regards to having the ability to think without being flooded or drowned by your emotions? And this would become another good way, honestly, to be able to judge where your emotional intelligence is. This is like literally like when you're doing a fact evaluation, go ahead and do a fact evaluation on where your EI is and your emotional objectivity. Because to me, these are things that when it's all said and done are going to make a huge difference for you. So when I say use your EI, I'm not asking you to dismiss your emotions, but put them in a place, put them in check. So then you're able to explore somebody else's POV when you're doing the fact evaluation. Like, okay, was their response totally unwarranted? Or was there something potentially that could have happened? Because sometimes people try to respond to you like, hold up, I responded this way because of this, but because we get in our personal space and we don't want to see anybody else's perspective, we push back and be like, I really don't care why you did it. That's a problem. Because if there was a precipitating incident that could lead to a person responding or reacting in a way and not responding, then that's when you got to step back and do a fact evaluation. Real talk. So the question stands. I'm going to work on this for my next episode about objectivity IQ. Like, how can you really gauge where you're at and your ability to truly be objective? Because that within itself is always a work in progress. You know what they say? I'll go ahead and put it on the screen. Check yourself before you wreck yourself again. And we often wreck ourselves because we refuse to use thought to check our emotions, and we just react. And then you got to go back because you say something inappropriate. And then you got to go back and do work because you didn't take the time to put your emotions in check, to perceive what's going on, evaluate it, and then respond accordingly. So real talk, what's your objectivity IQ like? And because you have no gauge, I will make sure that I get you one after the next episode. Because how can you know where you're at with your EI or even your objectivity if you don't exactly know what the range looks like? How to gauge besides understanding how you feel. Like you might be like, well, that feeling was less intense this time, but is that really a good gauge because it's less intense? It could be, but maybe a little bit more to know how much you've grown and getting to that best version of yourself using your emotional intelligence tool. Okay, let's talk about, before we go to break, signs that you are lying to yourself and don't know it. This means you're not acting in a truthful way. You're not using honesty appropriately. Great article that's going to be in the podcast resource section. It's by a life coach. Her name is Charlene Dior. I'm a huge fan of hers. I want to try to have her on the show. I'm going to do more shows where it's less of me and somebody else. But I read the article, and everything I put in the podcast resource section, real talk, are things that I felt were spot on. It was my thinking. I said, I'm not about to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to share this because this is exactly my thinking. I'm going to give credit for it and keep it moving. But in this article, she has 7 signs you're lying to yourself and you don't know it. She really pinpointed a couple things that I thought were good. And this is things that you can think about. And it's worthy of, I'm going to go ahead and put these on the screen because me just saying it, just in case you want to jot it down, I want to give you time to do it. One of the first things that she talked about is your emotions don't match your words. One of the things that I frequently talk about in my episodes is congruency. I throw that word around a lot. Like you need to be incongruent. If your actions don't match your words, if your words don't match your actions, if your actions don't match how you feel, if you feel don't match your words, you're incongruent. And that's a first red flag that you need to step back and say, okay, possibly I cannot be working on the best version of myself if I'm not being congruent in what I do and what I say and how I feel and what I do and what I say. So that the first thing she said, I said, I call it congruency. But I like, she says, if your emotions don't match your words, if you're incongruent with these things, that right there is a key sign you're not being honest with yourself. Your behavior doesn't align with your proclamations. So if you put out there, I'm 100, I do this, I'm honest, I speak the truth, I'm 100, but yet you're not, stop saying it because real talk, we're all human. And you're not always going to be 100 if something impacts you on a deep emotional level. But when you're emotionally intelligent, you give yourself the space to do the work and you stop making proclamations and you live in accordance with truth. Because truth doesn't mean you don't have a weak moment. So your behavior doesn't align with your proclamations, who you say that you are. Again, 1 and 2 are clearly about congruency. 3, you make extreme statements. Bingo. This is a fact. When truth be told, it may not be facts based on reality. It might be facts on your perspective. And you refuse to think anybody else, oh, you're 100% wrong. I know that I'm right. Or you're this kind of person. You do this, because you're only seeing things from your perspective. I thought that was huge, because nothing is absolute. And I always tell people there is a strong danger in life when you operate from positions of absolute of anything, because nothing except for death and taxes is probably absolute. Not to be funny. So you make extreme statements to try to back up what you feel. You feel you don't feel authentic. And I think that's key. And that's four. If you feel like you're working, again, this is the underlying theme to this is what? Congruency. If you legitimately feel that when you're doing things that you don't feel it resonates with who you really are, and a lot of people struggle with maybe how people perceive you is not how you see yourself, but you shouldn't be living in accordance with what you believe other people think that you are. And a lot of people will do that because maybe their friends think they're a certain way, or their family thinks they're a certain way, and they feel they have to appease people to be able to keep the peace or be happy. I'll be damned. Be true to yourself, because when you start being inauthentic is when you have a problem. 5, you're not open to the input of others. If the first time someone tries to share something with you and you can't let them finish a sentence, you shut them down, you don't want to hear it. You know something? When you're not willing to hear, I'm not saying just useless criticism, but if someone's trying to share something with you about a situation, but you refuse to listen, or you're always cutting them out, okay, your emotional intelligence is real low, if that's on a scale. Because one of the greatest things we learn in that journey of getting to that best version of ourselves is listen to the outside noises, to hear think, what do you hear? And if you hear something that you don't feel resonate with you, ask yourself, what are these rumblings I'm hearing about myself? And the hardest thing to do is to be honest with yourself. Maybe you are doing some of the things that the rumblings are saying. Maybe it only happened occasionally, but now a person wants to label you and make that who you are. You know, with most people, it only takes one incident before they're going to determine who they think you are. Well, here's what's key. Who someone thinks that you are and who you are two different things. And what really matters the most is what you think about yourself. Now, don't get this twisted, because you can't go at work and think that who you are can just be anything. You do have to be congruent in certain situations that are very costly to you. But in those high value relationships, remember that conversation we had, you do not have to submit to what others believe to be your truth. Michael Carson weighs in again. Thank you. Just like Michael Carson, you could join the conversation. Just type something in the comment section, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, but I can share it on screen just like this. If you're watching it, you can read it. But if you're listening, I'll read it to you. Michael Carson says, you just said it. Emotional intelligence is key. Many don't use it. No, they don't. And they wonder why they got to go back and do all this back work because they reacted opposed to responding. And I'm going to tell you something. When you really become aware of emotional intelligence, you really begin to truly check yourself, because you'll be watching people and you'll be like, that's interesting. And you kind of just start to back away because you realize the way their behavior is reacting and not responding. 6, you're never wrong. Oh, you got some people who think they know the answer to everything, that their reaction to everything is appropriate. And if it isn't, it's because you kind of brought that from me. They think that they're never wrong and that everything they do is acceptable. If you're one of those people, good luck with that. I don't have much to say about it, because if you believe that right there says you're not working from a position of being honest with yourself, because there's no way we're all ever 100% right about everything, because you learn something new every day. So there's a possibility you may be working in a vein of something that you know nothing about and discover a truth about something, because experiences will do that for us. And 7, you find yourself in over your head. You always take on more that you can handle. You know, you also, you put so much out there. Now you're chewing on too much, and it's hard to take it all in and swallow. And a lot of people are like this. They will carry that burden, and they don't know that if you just can be honest with yourself and say, you know something, real talk, this is a bit much for me emotionally, mentally, physically, financially. I can't do this. And if somebody struggles with your truth, because that's what this is about, oh well. We find no issue often compromising our own personal truths to appease other people because they make us feel like we're supposed to. And the minute you find the courage to say, pump the brakes, I can't do this right now. I need my space. If you just worked at work and somebody asks you to do something and you mentally don't have the energy to do it, you do not have to feel guilted into doing it because they get an attitude with you about it. But like, I'm sorry that you're upset because I need my mental space because I had a rough day at work. I'm willing to help you, but right now I just need my space. And if people can't respect that, don't worry about it and don't feel guilty. But it's being able to be honest enough with yourself to say, I can't do this right now, and not carrying too heavy of a burden, which often turns into stress, depression, anxiety, when people don't know their boundaries and they don't know when to say no. Great article, 7 Signs You Are Lying to Yourself and Don't Know It, by Charlene Dior. I would tell you it's going to be on the podcast resource section. It is worthy of checking out. Everything she said, those 7 things. And she goes into, by the way, deeper detail in her own explanation. But to me, I was like, spot on, Charlene, Miss Dior. What you're saying, it's it. She's a life coach. And I was like, and these are some of the things when you're getting to the best version of yourself, which, by the way, isn't really always about the mental health perspective. Sometimes it's about life coaching, learning new behaviors in life and abandoning old behaviors that never really were good for you. And this is often why life coaching is huge. It's another thing I'm putting into my arsenal, because I don't think everybody needs a therapist. Sometimes you just need a life coach, someone to help you navigate some difficult situations that may be causing you anxiety or stress. Doesn't mean you're burdened with a lot of mental health issues necessarily, or mental wellness issues. So I think life coaching is fantastic. So let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back and discuss why you have to live with truth, and why you have to be honest with yourself, and why it's something you absolutely can't compromise. Why, when you're getting to the best version of yourself, truth with yourself has to be absolutely front and center. You're tuned into My Ambition, Your Ambition. This is episode 51, understanding truth and how to be honest with yourself to lead with honesty with others. We'll be right back.
Please stop and listen, because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
Stepping out of bed. It's easy to take for granted. You work, eat, play, sleep, and get out of bed the next morning. Seems simple. But if you're one of 25 million individuals in the United States living with major depression, sleep isn't always so easy. Neither is navigating your daily life free of guilt or hopelessness, or having the ability to enjoy time out with friends, make simple decisions, enjoy hobbies, or go to work. Major depression is the leading cause of disability across the United States, and without treatment, the frequency and severity of symptoms tend to increase over time. However, there is hope. Major depression is treatable, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Today, there are a variety of treatment options to choose from. The key is to get an evaluation and find a treatment plan that is right for you. Free education, information, and support programs are available. You are not alone. We can help.
It's okay to think you're in a toxic relationship with the world right now.
It's okay to feel like your world is changing.
It's okay if it's hard to find the words to express how you feel.
It's okay to feel like you just want to become someone else.
It's okay if you're panicking over an inability to control your life right now.
It's okay to have trouble maintaining your normal routine while staying home.
It's okay if you're feeling more cynical than usual.
It's okay if you want to curse more than you usually do.
It's okay to wear your favorite tank top several days in a row.
It's okay to miss your job.
It's okay to just stay quiet.
It's okay to be depressed.
It's okay to talk to your cats like they understand what you're saying.
It's okay not to feel the most fabulous right now.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.
Alrighty, buddy. Welcome back to My Ambition, Your Ambition, coming to you live from Cabos San Lucas, Mexico. I'm on vacation, but the show must go on because I'm absolutely committed to making the conversation about mental wellness a normal, everyday conversation. I love that collaboration of actors from different shows that go into it's okay to do not be okay, and this is why. And you hear that a lot, but a lot of people struggle with the idea that if I'm a strong person, I can't show that I'm having a weakness. It's okay. Yes, it is. It's okay to not be okay for whatever the situation is. So I love that joint venture with TBS, TNT, HBO Max. I thought it was a fantastic way to kind of share that with people. So before the break, I said when we come back, we're going to discuss why you have to live with truth, and you must be honest with yourself first and foremost before anybody else. So we've had a real talk time in the show. Let's do our first real toolbox moment in the show. And that's the tool we're putting into our My YOUR Toolbox today is honesty. So, we put everything into a framework. And like I said earlier, when I talked about a lie versus the truth, honesty is the adherence to facts and the fairness and straightforwardness of conduct, which means within itself, truth is acting within fact and reality. So honesty is how you put truth into action. And that's how you begin to live and be the best version of yourself. Because when you're honest with yourself, truth be told, it'll be hard to be dishonest with others because you've taken the step and been honest with the most important person in your life, which is you. So when we talk about having a toolbox moment, let's talk about how to use this tool. Because a lot of times, it's abstract. It's easy to use a physical tool like a hammer, a screwdriver, whatever, a wrench. But the things that are not tangible, sometimes it's difficult to figure out how do I really begin to employ being honest with myself on a daily basis. I always say every day, every moment. Seriously, there's some things I want you to consider when we talk about how to be fair and straightforward in your conduct. So I'm gonna put these on the screen if you're jotting it down or just for future reference, or you may come back and watch the episode and it's there. So here's ways to learn how to use the honesty tool. This is requiring you do not rely totally on past experiences to navigate a current situation. This is where our emotions can get the best of us. Yes, past experiences do help us to be able to navigate through our daily lives. It's something we call implicit and explicit memory. And implicit memory is something that's in your head, like how to drive to work all the time. Where explicit is you have an experience that you remembered that when I drove to work, there was construction on that path, so I have to go a different way. So just by human nature, our memory operates honestly like, its own program, that it teaches us about danger, Will Robinson, or this is a pleasurable feeling. These are all things that are part of the human experience, but you cannot use every experience to dictate current situations. And this is where people often get themselves into a world of trouble, trying to apply a past situation to a current one because they seem similar, but you didn't quite look at the facts, or maybe you didn't act in a realistic way about what happened. Similarity does not denote sameness. It means there's something to pay attention to. And this is where people tend to kind of fall off. 2, do not lead with emotion. And I know this is hard. Check and assess what has happened. Is it possible it wasn't intentional or malicious? And that's where people often fall short. They get in their feelings and they just refuse to be able to see anything from any other perspective because they have no objectivity. They don't understand the difference between perception and perspective, and that hence they're not working on that best version of themselves. So opposed to allowing yourself to really be overwhelmed with emotion. If something does create that experience for you, then opposed to reacting, I want you to stop, drop, just kidding. No, I want you to fall back and let the emotion wash over you. Remember I told you about emotional marinating a couple episodes back? So it's okay to be present in the moment and to understand why the emotion is there. Is it because, wait a minute, this just reminded me of a past experience, but let me look at the situation. Is it really the same situation? Did this person know this is something that was actually going to bother me? Was their action something that was intentional? Or again, was the outcome in the situation something that just didn't sit well with me? It doesn't mean they had poor or bad intentions. The outcome just doesn't sit well with me. That's being factual and honest. If the facts say this wasn't a situation that was meant to be a detriment to you, then treat it as such. But if you're looking at the facts and you really do feel, because you're being objective, like, oh no, that person did it with the full intention of really pissing me off, they meant to hurt me, then you know how to respond. But first, sit in that emotion, let it exist. Negative emotions have a purpose in our life. Go back to the episodes I talked about how there's toxic positivity, and that tries to exclude negative experiences, emotions. It tries to subdue them, but we need those to be able to grow. But you don't grow unless you evaluate them and properly understand where they have a place in your emotional intelligence. So those are the two things you need to do when you're really trying to figure out how to use honesty as a tool. Do not rely totally on past experiences to navigate a current situation, and do not lead with emotion. And I know checking our emotions are hard because as the human species, we're just driven by emotion and passion, but learning how to control your emotions, evaluate your emotions, and even begin to understand others is important. So hopefully that's helpful in some ways that you can figure out how to navigate using honesty as a tool. So why do you have to live with truth? Be honest with yourself. Another great article I came across, which will be in the myakai.com, go to podcast resource section right there under episode 51. It was an article that's by Jacqueline Pierce. She is a counselor, works a lot with family and couples therapy, and it's on goodtherapy.com. Read the article, it was like back from 2019. I said, again, Jackie, you nailed this. I need to have you on my show. And if I wasn't out of the country and wasn't sure how I was going to be able to navigate this episode, I would have reached out to one of them to have been a guest, but I wasn't exactly sure how my first real live remote was going to roll, especially on international internet. So hence I didn't want to try to plan something and then I couldn't come through. Michael Carson is chiming in again. I try to fall back and also think about other people's character. This is important, an evaluation tool. My perception might not be aligned with that person's character. Absolutely. I might be overreacting in the moment. Yes, you might be. But a lot of people have a hard time accepting that they've overreacted to a situation because that's somebody who doesn't like to be wrong. Like I said, all outcomes were not meant to be malicious or intentionally negative or bad. It just might be with something within your emotional space that your emotional IQ is not up here with somebody else's where they can handle things differently. Some people will shoot straight from the hip and tell you what they think. And guess what? Everybody's not bulletproof. And they'll be like, oh, but they were just being honest. Thank you for sharing that. And that character piece, knowing who you're dealing with, is another way that you have to make sure about where you're being objective and where your emotional intelligence actually stands. Thank you for sharing that. So in this article by Jacqueline Pierce on goodtherapy.com, it was about why you have to live with truth and be honest with yourself. And I loved it because, again, I said, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Jackie, I'm going to pretty much spit out what you said because I agree with it. And I'm going to put the article up there because she fleshes into these things more, but I wanted to just throw them out there. Like, this is worthy of reflection when you talk about why you have to be honest with yourself and stop the biggest lie ever told, which is usually to you. Because if you lie to yourself, it's easy to lie to others. Just know that. Because you have no, I would say at this point, type of litmus test to stop you. Like, well, if I'm lying to me, why am I going to try to be honest with other people? I don't value honest at its most important source, self. So she said in this article on goodtherapy.com, what is true will continue to exist. Nothing in this world is always going to be constant. And this is the thing I think was important, and actual, what you just said, Michael Carson, resonates with this, is that truth will always continue. It never goes away, even when you attempt to bend it or modify it to your will to work to your advantage. The truth always comes to light. The question is, when it comes to light, where do you stand? And were you really honest? Did you have a distortion? And was it an intentional distortion? So truth will always exist. It will always be constant. You choosing not to want to be congruent with it is the thing that's always going to be a problem. Everything changes. However, some things exist forever. And when she said that, I was like, amen to that. And the truth tends to have that type of existence. It's kind of like H2O. The formula for changes with the truth is people who keep trying to modify it and add or subtract something to it. You become more fearless when you are honest with yourself and you accept your weaknesses and your flaws. I can 100% attest to this. When you finally stop feeling like perfection is important, or the idea that other people have created of you, which maybe you never really wanted, when you begin to become congruent with yourself and you accept, this is not my strength, this is a weakness, or this is clearly a flaw that I have, and I know it. It makes easier navigating the truth because now you've just been honest with others. So when other people try to throw it back at you, like you just think you know everything, you know what my response to that is? No, I know what I know. Now, thank you for the compliment, but I know what I know. And in this particular thing we're talking about, this would be a fact. And just because you're struggling with the fact that it's a fact and you don't like that it's coming from me, I'm sorry. I didn't say I know everything, but I take time to know what I know. And I stand firmly on my position when I know it. And a lot of people will struggle when you stand firm in your truth. They get upset about it. And don't get me wrong, some sarcasm can slide out if you keep being cheeky with me about things. I'll be like, yep, I'm glad you know that. So now that you know that, let's get into dealing in the facts of what we're talking about right now. Are you out your feelings right now? I can be cheeky. I can be petty. If you like, catch me on a bad PMS day. Anyways, something else that was in the article that Miss Pierce spoke of, and I thought was key about, you gain more clarity too when you're honest with yourself. When you have better clarity about things you want in life, when you are completely honest about what you want versus maybe what somebody else wants for you or with you, if it's not congruent with what you want, or you don't feel like this is something that's going to mesh with that, when you come to that moment of having clarity about you, it's easy to talk to others about what isn't working for you. Like, I understand you want this, especially let's say you're in a relationship where it's a partnership with someone. You're a couple, you're married. There has to be compromise. So don't think when I say you gain clarity, it means you lack the ability to compromise, but you understand where your boundaries and limitations exist, or compromising turns into true compromising of self. We make sacrifices in relationships. They shouldn't fully turn into you sacrificing or compromising everything about yourself within that sacrifice. You have to learn to strike the balance. Relationships are always healthier. And a lot of people they struggle with this because these are key things to really kind of focus on. But relationships become healthier when you build and you come from a position of honesty and truth, because it should be the foundation of your relationships. No relationship can survive without honesty with yourself and with the other people in your life, whether it be children, work peers, bosses, significant other, parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, whoever. You have to deal with those relationships with honesty. If you fail to be honest with yourself, you can't really ever be honest with anybody else. How many times I've already said that during this episode? But the key thing about honesty is life really does become more beautiful. And she kind of ended her article on good therapy with this, Jacqueline Pierce. And I thought, this is so true, because there's a peacefulness in honesty. When you've reconciled the things that you know that cause distress and you spoke your truth, there's something to be said about the peace that exists in speaking your truth, even if it bothers somebody else. They got to figure out why your truth bothers them so much. It's not for you to figure out. Now, if they want to come back and have a conversation with you about it, so be it. But it doesn't mean you have to keep compromising your truth to accommodate other people, especially if other people aren't doing the work. What did I tell you about that wonderful saying about meeting people where they are? Here's how this works. You only meet people where they're at when they're willing to do the work themselves. So I'm not going to walk 10 steps back to somebody who they're sitting in anxiety, depression, sadness, woe is me, but they're not willing to do the work, even though you're willing to work with them. When you take steps backwards to meet people where they're at, it has to be because they're taking some steps to meet you, and you're creating a new demarcation point to work on that relationship. So you're giving a little, they're giving a little, and you're going to find a space where you can operate together to build and work on that foundation of that relationship. It doesn't always have to be where you're at, but it doesn't always have to be where they're at either. That's the thing about sacrifice and compromising in relationships. So life does become more beautiful when you strive to, to be positive. And you start believing in positive things, and you gain clarity and honesty and truth, and you live accordingly. All right. Great article. It's a podcast resource. Go to myakai.com, click on podcast resources. On that tab, scroll to episode 51. Read these 2 articles because they're fantastic. Let's have a second real talk time of the show as we're getting closer to wrapping up. And this is a real question. Can you be 100% honest with yourself? And if you say no, that's where you've already started your honesty journey. It takes a lot of work to be 100% honest with yourself. It does. Doesn't mean you can't get there. And it doesn't mean it's always going to be 100%. Sometimes it might sit at 95 because, sometimes that awful truth that's staring you in the face is taking a little bit of heavy lifting to process it. And maybe you got to pull back the layers to really get to the core of what that truth is. So you might be in denial a little bit, no. And you're like, oh, shit. Maybe. Yeah. Okay. You're working at your pace, though. You don't have to rush into everything being 100% spot on, but you have to enter with, I'm going to be honest with myself. And this might hurt a little bit more than I want it to, or I'm accustomed to, is usually where we start in that mental wellness journey. When you lie to yourself, ultimately, like I've already said, you will lie to others, and you'll never be honest with where you are or who you are. Lying requires that you wear a mask and you keep up a facade. And that requires a lot of energy and effort. And it moves you further away from your authenticity. A lack of truth and honesty with self automatically denies you access to the best version of yourself. Know that. So, do you hold your emotions, thoughts, and actions to a high regard? Marinate on that for a minute. Do you hold your emotions, thoughts, and actions to a high regard? Or do you spend a whole lot of time working on the outside, trying to make other people more accountable for what you feel is woe is me, and the disadvantage you experiences and the pain that you have? Truth is constant. It's what you choose to do with it that matters. And that's why being 100% honest with yourself, it sucks. It doesn't feel good. But what's the oddest thing about embracing truth is something you hold to high regard, as eventually less and less it gets harder. It doesn't become as hard to do. And it becomes a way that you really want to be, because the clarity and the relief of being honest, man, I'm so glad I stopped faking that. That's why I tell people, don't say fake it till you make it. No, be who you are in the moment. And if who you are is not who you want to be, figure out where the disconnection is or where you are deficient. That was a big part of the conversation last week. If who you are and who you want to be, the difference is being deficient and just needed to do some additional works to get to there, or if it's a full disconnect, now you got some heavier work. And I'm like, please call yourself a therapist or get a life coach, because disconnection means there's some deeper things that you need to work on. Feeling you're a little insufficient means there's some key things, what they are, that you can work on. So do you hold your emotions, thoughts, and actions to a high regard, or do you push it on others when you feel like you don't meet expectations for yourself? Because it's always easy to blame somebody else for when we're not where we should be, or we're not who we want to be. I didn't get this. Oh, well. But guess what? We're all adults now. So what are we doing to move forward? You can't live in the past. And if you do, you will probably be unhappy. And you can't change the past. And if you probably keep trying to, you will be unhappy. You can't reconcile the past. You can own it for what it is, acknowledge it for what it is. And if you're dealing with a person you can sit down and talk about it with, great. But what's one of those rules I tell you about? If you reconciling something that truly weighs you down requires somebody else to have an aha moment, a moment of truth or an apology, or to forgive you, you may not get to where you need to be. That episode about understanding the art of the apology, I kind of feel it's still one of my best episodes, because I had to tell somebody apologizing has got nothing to do with forgiveness. It's about accountability. And you getting to the best version of yourself is all about accountability. So, being honest with yourself, just know this, can be painful, but it can also be highly rewarding. When honesty meets your willingness to change, there is no telling the ways you can grow and improve. Let me say that again. Honesty can be painful, but it can be highly rewarding. So when your honesty and your willingness to change, when they meet, there's no telling the ways you can grow and improve. But it's when you're in denial and you're refusing and you're not open to change or to be honest with yourself is where you probably will find that you will consistently be incongruent and often not happy. Let's wind down the episode. What are ways to get to being honest? And let's better yet, habit forming. How can we make being honest with ourselves habit forming? So, there's a couple different things I want you to keep in mind when you think about this. One, I want you to be able to acknowledge the good and the bad in your life. Everything is not always going to be sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns. It's not. The good, the bad, the ugly. With good, we're always up here. With bad, everything is doom and gloom, and I can't take this, and stop. There's always going to be some bad along the way. Unexpected things, outcomes you didn't want, shit that throws you off your square. It's going to be there. The question is what you do with it. Like, oh, this is throwing me off my square. Why? Oh, okay, I'm pissed. But why did it throw me off my square? That's how I think. When something really gets the best of me, I'm like, why did that get the best of me? I'm a little pissy about it, but I'm like, how did it manage to get under my skin like that? Well, why didn't I see that coming? I'm always trying to evaluate. Take time to reflect. That goes hand in hand. Acknowledge both the good and the bad in your life, and then take time to reflect on the good and the bad. I don't want you just to reflect on your bad in your life. I want you to reflect on the good stuff too. Like, this was good and why? Why did this happen? What did I do to move this along to get this particular outcome or these types of consequences? I want more of this. So I'm always saying, dig deep into the bad stuff. I want you to reflect on the good stuff too. 3, admit when you make mistakes. One of the worst things we often learn as children is that when we make a mistake, we're often shamed for it. Well, mistakes are the true things that you can really call your own that nobody really wants from you. But it's what you do with your mistakes. Some people are often so scrutinized for mistakes, they internalize it and they begin to believe that they are a mistake. Everybody's human. Everyone makes mistakes. There is no such thing as perfection. So if you feel that way, that you are a mistake, one, you should be seeing a therapist. Start doing that heavy lifting, that work, to figure out why do you feel that way. And I guarantee you're going to uncover some past experiences, some really key ones that you're going to nail and be like, yeah, that's when it really all started. That's when I started feeling like I just couldn't do anything right. You may not call yourself the mistake. You will find yourself in that self-talk, another episode, by the way, down the way, of saying, I don't ever do anything right. I'm always making a mistake. I'm never good enough. It's okay to make mistakes. Admit it, learn from it, and move on. 4, pay attention to your feelings. Because if that self-talk I just talked about is, I never do anything right, I'm just totally a screw up. Okay, that's negative self-talk. And it's like, why do you feel that way? Where is the core? Where is the source for those emotions at for you? Did you really generate them on your own, or did somebody else help you to generate them? Get to the core of what the issues really are and work through them. Again, this sounds like a good time to go get a counselor or a therapist. 5, find someone you trust to be open with you. Now, mind you, this can be difficult because people you assume that will be honest with you always can't do it. So you really have to look at it. You got to find someone you feel who's living in accordance with honesty with themselves. If you see a person who's walking the walk and talking the talk, like that person does something and they apologize to you, and that's a person you might want to align yourself with. Be like, hey, by the way, no one's perfect, but you're looking for a person you feel like can truly embrace and accept you for who you are and not be judgmental because of what the status quo or, social cues say we should be as people. Avoid overthinking and self-blaming. We all make mistakes. So accept that you maybe made a poor choice and there's outcomes. And even with negative outcomes, whatever the consequence it might be, get ready to take it and understand, I got to do this. I made the mistake. It didn't make me a bad person. I made a bad choice. I got to deal with this. But don't overthink it. Don't get into the self-blaming thing. Know, number 7, know when you trust your gut. Know when you're feeling right, like this is not a good idea. I know they're not going to like when I probably say no, but this is not a good idea for me right now. And it's okay. Own that. 8, accept what you don't know. If you are working through an emotion that you quite can't put the framework around, take the time to figure it out. I always tell people, write down how you feel, why you feel. And the more you kind of start to journal and kind of write these ideas down, I guarantee you're going to get to the bottom of the thing that probably really is bothering you the most. But accept why you can't maybe put your finger initially on an emotion or why an outcome happened. Like, what did I miss in this? Take the time to reflect, to figure out. And 9, know that honesty takes practice. If it was easy, like what did I say before? If the truth was easy, nobody would lie. So take the time and practice on checking yourself with your honesty. So final thoughts. Being honest with yourself is not always going to be difficult, but it's required to have a healthy relationship with yourself, which is the first most important relationship, and that relationship with others. This is a tool that we're putting in our toolbox that's about establishing a healthy relationship with you. And from there, all other relationships will fall into line. Most of the time, I'm going to tell you something. If you got a person who's not doing the work on themselves, your honesty will not maybe come across as a beacon of light. You may get on their nerves because they're stuck someplace else and they're emotionally can't meet you where you're at. Michael Carson said it earlier, understanding a person's character, but your EI about understanding somebody else's emotions will help you to navigate your honesty and not compromise it. When you hold you accountable, you will emulate the behavior that you want to have with yourself and other relationships, which equates to healthier and more fulfilling relationships. Michael Carson, hey, thank you for checking in. Gotta run. Great advice. Enjoy your vacay. Thank you. And I appreciate that you tuned in. I always love you guys' insight when you share just like that. You can always be part of the show. All you have to do is type in the comment section on Facebook or YouTube, and boom, just like that, I can share it on the screen. But that's my final thoughts. Accountability. That's another big thing in our toolbox that I always throw it out there. So maybe I need to start talking more about accountability and congruency are big things that, need to be in the toolbox as well. And I shouldn't make the assumption that people totally understand what it means to truly be accountable or what congruency actually looks like. It's important to not assume that we all understand these things because our insight might be off. Good afternoon, Charles Edward Bingham McDavid Sr. Thank you for checking in the show. I always appreciate it, though we are winding down. So with that being said, thank you to everyone. I always appreciate when you listen to the podcast. This is episode 51. 51 episodes in. As I say, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help you to identify your ambitions, harness that motivation to help you to acquire the success and satisfaction you seek in your life. Remember, episodes can always be found on iTunes, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify. There's so many ways that you can always listen to the show. Of course, you can always find episodes on MAYAkai.com. But if you're going to your favorite podcast platform of choice, like, subscribe, and share is all I ask. And you can always find my podcast on all those platforms. Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. You might even have to put the periods, M.A.Y.A. And it usually pops up, but My Ambition, Your Ambition. But you can just take all that hard work out and just go to MAYAkai.com and you listen to episodes there. Remember, there's going to be a couple podcast companions for this show. So just go to MAYAkai.com, click on the podcast resource section, and you can read the articles I have there by Miss Dior, who is a life coach, and by Jacqueline Pierce, who is a counselor. They are great articles that I use for the show because they spoke the truth to me, and I felt like there was no reason to reinvent the wheel. Also, drop me a virtual letter. I got a couple I got to get through to determine if it's something I want to use on the next show. So you can always join the conversation that way too. Send me a virtual letter. So if an episode has got you thinking, reflecting, or you're navigating a difficult situation, you're feeling stuck, hey, just go ahead and drop me a virtual letter to the Maya mailbag. Just send an email, aka a virtual letter, to getinspired@mayakai.com. And I will maybe throw back a couple questions to you, like, hey, you kind of threw something in me if you didn't give me enough details, and I'll kind of, share my thoughts on what I think about the situation. By no means, what I think does not mean it's right for you. This is about shedding light onto mental wellness and understanding I want to normalize these conversations with people. So I'm not giving you advice because I'm not your therapist. I'm just sharing some insight and perspective on things. And lastly, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Maya Kai. Type it in, scroll past all the Japanese anime, and voila, there I will be. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. And you know how I end every episode. Until next time, remember your present becomes your past and your future is no more. So make the most of every single day. Be well, stay safe. But one of the most important things in all of this is stay absolutely amazing. I'll see you next week, next Thursday, 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'll be back in the States, back in my normal setting. But thank you for tuning in. I enjoyed this conversation this week. Until next time, everyone. Ciao.
Get inspired, get motivated with Maya Akai and the My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking, thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find Maya on Twitter and Instagram at Maya_Akai. On Facebook at Maya Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything Maya at MayaAkai.com.